but it's great to see people here and great to have an opportunity to share this presentation with you. And it's not just me, you're going to hear from some of my colleagues in the curriculum team as well. And where they can't be here, we've got some recordings to share with you. So our presentation is entitled Collaboration and Care in Climate Education, Brave Responses to an Uncertain Future. And I'm hoping you can see my next slide now.
Yep.
Excellent. So what we're going to share this morning is some research that we did around a course that we've been developing in the IET curriculum team, which is called Teacher Development Addressing the Climate Emergency. And it's a 15 credit, 12-week online course at postgraduate level. And we're hoping that it's going to be available from March 2024, although I guess Leanne might say a little bit about that later on. And it can be a standalone course or it can be studied as part of the Masters in Online Teaching, which is a new qualification within IET. And we've also been producing a taster of some of the topics via a free Open Learn online short course supporting climate action through digital education. And we're hoping that that's going to be available even sooner, possibly as soon as next week. So why did we produce this course? To some people, it might be obvious because the climate emergency is the greatest threat of our time. And people in many countries, and especially the countries that are most affected by the climate emergency, are feeling quite powerless and unable to mitigate that threat. They don't feel that they have the skills and the capabilities. So education has a massive role to play. And learners need not only technical skills, but they need skills that can enable them to transform unjust social and economic structures. But many teachers say that they feel they lack the skills to deliver effective climate education. So we have a situation where learners are currently dissatisfied with the quality of climate-related teaching, and climate education is often fragmented across the curriculum. It's taught in isolated disciplines as knowledge to be tested, rather than recognising that climate change is this really urgent issue that's facing us, our species. And people need skills and education around values as well, so that they not only learn about the environment, but they can act for the environment. So there's a lot of work to do. And we felt that we could play a part in this. That was our reason for creating the course. And of course, in the curriculum team in IET produce courses all the time. But our experience of producing this one felt rather different. So when we had an opportunity to present to the Higher Education and the Climate Crisis Conference in October, that prompted us to reflect on our experiences of producing the course through an autoethnographic study. And 7 of us met regularly in an online space over 12 weeks to talk and to write about our experiences of producing the course. And on the slide, you can see there's a summary of our methods there. So this was loosely based on collaborative autoethnography, but quite different methods to those we'd used before and those that we'd usually use in research around educational technology. Autoethnography requires a certain level of openness. It's quite risky and it can make researchers feel quite vulnerable, but it's this openness that can transform institutional culture and make academics visible in a trusting and more inclusive way. So when we went through this process, we identified 3 broad themes in our shared writing. And we're going to share with you, different members of the team are going to share with you examples of their narratives around these different themes. The first theme is about our own positionality. So we have our own academic and personal positionality that motivates and supports our work on the course. We wrote in our narratives about how we're positioned in our own institution and within our own field, but also politically and socially. And we each draw on a wealth of experience, but also knowledge gained within the communities that we belong to outside work, including political parties, faith groups, networks of families and friends. And each of us draws on what we might call a landscape of practice. But what unites us all is a strong commitment to social justice and to enabling educators to support learners in all contexts, not only to understand the climate emergency, but to address it through reintroducing the political. And this means supporting learners in democratic participation, public disruptive protest, and other direct action. So, first of all, we're going to hear from Leanne about her narrative on positionality.
So my decision to design this course, and indeed the other course that Kathy mentioned just earlier, it was grounded in my political position, and that's green. My conviction that the climate crisis is the most pressing challenge humanity has ever faced. My belief that I should be mindful in the choices that I make as an academic leader, and that this topic should be a priority, and also in my long-standing commitment to and research around equity and social justice. And for me, a critical part of the course is the critique of educational technology and the focus on degrowth, which we do need to discuss in more depth, I think. And also the ways in which we present this alongside the positive aspects of how EdTech can support educators and learners in addressing the climate crisis. Digital literacy skills are also vital. And there's a wealth of information and misinformation about climate change, mitigation, and adaptation online. And one of our roles was to support our learners and their learners in critically engaging with this information.
Thank you, Leanne. And secondly, we're going to hear from Irina, who's on maternity leave at the moment, about her positionality.
I think that my background in social justice and learning technology was very relevant. Social justice and climate justice are the two sides of the same coin, as the climate emergency exacerbates inequalities for those already excluded and marginalized. Research in both social justice and climate justice also focuses on communities or groups rather than individuals, and tends to adopt a holistic approach to analyzing and addressing problems. The assignment of the different topics and sections of the course to each of us also depended on simply where we were most knowledgeable. For example, I wrote a section on English teaching and climate change within the curriculum in Fusion Week because my first degree is in linguistics and language teaching. I really enjoy finding links between climate education and language teaching there, the two subjects that seem far away from each other at first glance. For example, writing the English teaching climate change section encouraged me to reflect on the connections between the extinction of native and indigenous languages and the extinction of endangered species.
Thank you to Irina for recording that for us. The next theme that we identified in our writing was that of interdisciplinarity and collaboration. And as Kerry Facer tells us, to harness the full power of education to address the climate emergency, we have to think and work differently. So building the course involves strong elements of interdisciplinarity and collaboration, and we support each other in working across disciplinary boundaries and exploring new connections in a way that some of us describe as magical. In our autoethnography, we've explored how the course is shaped by ongoing interactions with existing literature, grassroots knowledge and with students and educators across the world. Collaborative working widens our focus and makes the course that we're producing as relevant to as many educators as possible. And for narratives on this, we're going to hear from Maria and then from Simon.
I was invited to contribute to the course with my expertise in citizen science. And while it was easy for me to suggest tools and activities, the most challenging part was to frame this more practical space with theories and guidance for planning the activity and integrating it into teachers' existing learning aims and curricula. Eventually, I sought consultation from external colleagues whose focus is on sustainability specifically and environmental education across the world. I concluded adding different types of planning guidance, focusing on guidelines from environmental education organizations, the European Sustainability Competence Framework, and recommendations from systematic literature reviews on efficient practices in climate change. Reflecting on the variety of resources out there, I went back to what my colleagues wrote in the earlier weeks and engaged with theories, for instance, climate justice and political landscapes that I was not familiar with before. Knowing more about different perspectives, it made me think about the type of activities I would choose so that they can be relevant to different types of learners.
Thanks, Maria. And over to you, Simon.
Thanks, Kathy. I was invited to be part of the authoring team for this course because of my experience currently in online teaching and learning and historical expertise in the environmental field, because I did my undergraduate and PhD in ecology. So I've always had that interest. And for me, the most challenging parts of the process were in trying to write a course that worked for a very broad potential audience. We wanted the course to be useful to people working in education related roles in adult and community education, schools, colleges, universities, and importantly, private and community enterprises as well. Often when reviewing the work of other people, it was necessary to try and broaden their focus out because they had written for the sector they work in, whether it be higher education or whatever, and therefore they know the most about. So we needed to broaden it to be more accessible to everybody. And this was another reason for us designing the assessment element of the course to be as context flexible as possible so that it could be readily addressed by learners regardless of which part of the education, the broad education sector they came from.
Thanks, Simon. And then the third theme that we identified in our writing was the theme of uncertainty. And embracing uncertainty, it's a vital step in learners and communities becoming more resilient in the face of the climate emergency. But just as becoming a student involves being immersed in a liminal, an in-between or uncanny space, and learning to hold different perspectives in tension, the same is true for educators. And in no area is this uncertainty perhaps more prevalent at the moment than that of climate education, particularly for those of us who seek to educate teachers. The climate emergency brings a huge wave of uncertainty and it creates a demand for different kinds of knowledge worldwide, and it sets new conditions for knowledge production and sharing. And uncertainty can be a catalyst for creativity, but people must first identify and label their feelings as uncertainty and understand what's causing that uncertainty. So our collaborative autoethnography project provided an opportunity for us to explore our own feelings of uncertainty around climate education and identify how our awareness of uncertainty in learners and educators prompted a strong focus on pedagogies of care. And in relation to this theme, we're going to hear first of all from Carmel and then from me.
My research background is about online collaboration and social learning with a strong emphasis on educational technologies. When I joined the authoring team, I was not at all clear about my own take on climate education. I had a good sense of the knowledge gaps I had about the climate crisis scientific perspective. Obviously, I was not an expert on that front, which made me hesitant about my ability to contribute, but also excited to deep dive into this non-boundary ocean. During the authoring process, I saw each of us swimming, sailing, revealing new topographies, islands, sea creatures, and fellow sailors, while portraying new partial maps on the go. This set of partial maps is now stitched up into this course, suggesting some pathways, but still leaving space for more maps and for more educators to jump into this ocean and refine and reshape those maps to fit their own context, their own values, perspective, and more than everything, their own learners.
Thank you to Carmel for recording that. And then finally, we have a narrative from me. I'm also conscious that climate education is an uncomfortable space for me. I know there's a need for it, but it's not an easy place to be. It's scary and big, and I don't know enough. Looking back, I also know that I've done some of the work that I'm most proud of in uncomfortable spaces. Emotional aspects of learning are an important consideration for me. Many of the parts of the course I'm writing focus on the relationship between the climate emergency and health, including mental health. I'm influenced by pedagogies of care, knowing that before people can act in relation to the climate emergency, they need to acknowledge and talk about the feelings of extreme anxiety and powerlessness that this crisis generates. And this includes educators themselves. Building in time for learners to consider and address their own well-being is a priority. And I wonder if we could do even more of this throughout the course. So I'm almost at the end of our slides. This is a presentation that was produced for the Climate Emergency HE conference. So it wasn't a long one, but hopefully that gives us plenty of time for questions and discussion, and perhaps for some of my co-researchers to add some additional comments as well. But just to sum up what we've presented so far, I would say that our collaborative autoethnography allowed us to externalize and acknowledge what many of us referred to as a magical process of collaborating across disciplinary boundaries to collectively contribute to addressing an urgent and complex challenge, the climate emergency. We've made bold pedagogical decisions, bringing together different disciplines and subject areas to maximise the power of climate education. And we've also supported each other with coping with the emotional impact of writing a different kind of course, a course about environmental collapse and the uncertain future of our planet, alongside supporting our students to think about how they're going to support their own learners.